So, why are you here? Why have you come to listen to this talk? And hopefully you won't be asking yourself that question in half an hour's time. What is the purpose of this Buddhist Centre? And what is the goal of Buddhism? Well, the aim of Buddhist practice is to bring an end to suffering, to overcome what the Buddha overcame, to achieve what the Buddha achieved: full awakening, complete liberation, enlightenment, Bodhi. So the Buddha's enlightenment experience was beyond words and concepts, and the Buddha usually preferred to point out the path, a path of practice to give people a direct taste and experience of his vision. But sometimes the Buddha did use metaphor, and occasionally he used concepts to give us a flavour of the vision. And there's a poetic expression of words that probably comes closest to describing the Buddha's vision, which is known as Praticca Samappada, which I've written up there. And it's the translation of these verses down here. This being, that becomes. From the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. This is the phrase known as Praticca Samappada, and that's been translated into English as conditioned co-production or conditioned co-arising. So the Buddha chose to point us in the direction of his vision by saying that everything we experience is no more than a series of constantly changing events, which arise and pass in dependence on other events, and they themselves are the conditions for further events to arise. So everything we experience, including ourselves, is part of this flow of change, constantly changing events, conditioned by and influencing other events. A metaphor which we sometimes use to illustrate this is to compare our existence to that of eddies within a stream. So each of these eddies has got an apparent existence of its own, but they really exist only in relationship to and part of the stream, the larger stream that they're all part of. And the Buddha used similes, metaphors of water quite a lot to try and communicate his vision, and to describe the mind and to describe reality. And he once described reality as being like a great ocean. And when I was preparing this talk, I remembered an occasion when I was travelling. I was doing some travelling about 9 years ago, and I swam in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Tahiti. So together with some other backpackers I'd recently met at a hostel, we decided to swim out to an island that we could see out in the Pacific Ocean. And it didn't seem that it was very far away. But once we set out to swim, actually it transpired it was quite a bit further than we thought it would be. And so it was more of an effort than we thought it was going to be. And then when on my way back, when I swam back towards the campsite, the beach where the campsite was on, I found myself, to my horror, really kind of drifting in a different direction to the campsite. I thought I was swimming towards the campsite, but I was just getting further and further. I was just drifting away from the campsite. And what I realised is there was quite strong currents within the ocean that were at work. They were influencing my direction and pulling me away from the direction I thought I was swimming towards. So I ended up about probably 3/4 of a mile, half a mile, down the beach away from the campsite. Well, in the same way that the great oceans like the Pacific Ocean has got very powerful currents which direct the flow of the water, well, conditionality, within the flow of conditionality, within the flow of reality, there are currents, they're the same currents which direct the arising and the passing of these events. An awakening is possible, enlightenment is possible, because there are laws and there are currents within reality, within this flow of reality, that we can take advantage of to attain what the Buddha attained. There are currents that lead to enlightenment. And the Buddhist path can be seen as acting in cooperation with these currents and these processes. So the Buddha in the early suttas, he mentions two particular types of current. He mentions karma and he mentions dharma. There's two different types of current that's at work within reality. But he also hints that there's more than these two in the early suttas. And in the 3rd century, there was a scholar called Bodhinaga. Is this the right page? a chap called Buddhinaga in the 3rd century, he came up with a group of 5 categories for these currents that affect reality. And he said there's 5 categories, he called them the 5 niyamas. And these are the names of these 5 categories. So in effect, he came up with 3 more than the Buddha mentioned in the early sutras. And so these are categories or groups of different types of laws, different types of currents that influence reality. And Sangharakshita, our teacher, he's pointed out that there's a progressive trend. That's why I've got this kind of upwards arrow. There's a progressive trend within these different groups of niyamas with ascending levels of consciousness. So each kind of successive level of conditionality has a higher state of consciousness associated with it. So the first level of conditionality, what's called utu, and they're the laws that govern rocks, planets, molecules. So they're things like the laws of physics and chemistry. So for example, the law of gravity would come under this first level of conditionality. The second level of conditionality, the second niyama, that's the laws that govern organic matter. So plants, living organisms. So that includes the laws of biology and genetics. The third level, the mano niyama, that includes the laws that govern the animal kingdom, perception, instincts, reflexes, group behaviour. But there's a crucial point in the evolution of consciousness with the arising of awareness. So what distinguishes human beings, us, from animals, a lot of human beings, is awareness. We've got, when conditions are in place, awareness will arise. And with awareness, we've got the ability to step back from our experience and to observe our experience. We can observe our mind and our actions, and we can observe the consequences that our actions have. And so with the arising of awareness, a different level of conditionality comes into play, which is called karma, the karma niyama. Karma comes into play with awareness. And it's these currents, it's the karma currents and processes, they govern how our actions in the present produce our future state of mind, our future level of consciousness. And we can observe with awareness, our ethical actions, if we act ethically, that will accelerate the evolution of our consciousness. It will lead to the arising of more positive, more expansive states of mind. We become even more aware. And we can also observe the opposite. If we act unethically, unskillfully, those actions lead to suffering. They lead to narrow, contracted states of mind. So returning to the analogy of the great river, at a certain stage in the evolution of awareness, we also, with even more awareness, we begin to experience ourselves no longer as a separate eddy, operating on its own, but we start to identify more and more with the larger river, the kind of the larger flow of conditionality. And it's at this point in the evolution of consciousness that even higher level of conditionality comes into play, which is quite mysterious and powerful. And it's the Dharma niyama. So at this point, the Dharma niyama comes into action. And these are the processes that lead directly to enlightenment. It's because of the Dharma niyama that enlightenment and awakening is possible. So the Dharma niyama is it's a mysterious thing to try and describe, but it's a quality at play in the universe that leads to enlightenment. It could be described as a force which is acting in the universe. So we heard last week how Sangharakshita felt he wasn't the best person to start a new Buddhist movement. But sometimes he said, it's as though something started a new Buddhist movement through him. That something started a Buddhist movement through him. So to us, as eddies, separate eddies in the stream, the Dharma niyama is experienced as coming from outside us. It's experienced as something outside of our experience. But we could also describe it as what's highest in the universe. We could also, it's not something alien to us, because we can feel the Dharma niyama at work. We've all experienced it. The Buddhist faculty of Shraddha has been defined as what is highest in us, resonating with what's highest in the universe. So it's as though something beyond our individual will is tugging at us. It's calling us to wake up, pulling us in the direction of enlightenment. And what is highest within us responds to that. We can feel the Dharma niyama as a longing to fulfill our potential, a sense of there being more to life, an occasional vision beyond our superficial daily life, and a vision of something higher. So the Dharma niyama is not a being, it's not an omnipresent entity. but it's the highest level of these processes at work in the universe. And the spiritual life consists of setting up the conditions for it to arise. And Buddhist practice, so I started off with a question, well, why we're here, what's Buddhist practice about? Well, Buddhist practice consists in working with the karma and the dharma niyama processes. And transforming our mind, working with karma to transform our mind, to raise our level of consciousness, so that the conditions are in place for the dharma niyama to arise. And this conscious cooperation with both the karma and the dharma niyama, that's one way of seeing the Buddhist act of going for refuge, which Satyajoti mentioned last week. So we'll come out of the heady heights of conditionality and Buddhist philosophy, and we'll step back into the practical day-to-day experience of things. And what I'm going to look at for the rest of the talk is, well, how do we go about this? How do we go about working with the karma and the dharma niyama? How do we go about cooperating with these processes in the universe? What do we do? So the spiritual life, it can be seen as consisting definite stages, progressive stages of the spiritual life. And there's various models of the Buddhist path. We've got the model of the threefold path, which is ethics, meditation and wisdom. There's a noble eightfold path, which has got 8 stages. I can't remember them all. There's eight stages in that one. And there's different models of the Buddhist path. And in 1978, Sangharakshita, who was the founder of our movement, he gave a talk entitled The System of Meditation. And he drew on a Mahayana path, a model called the 5 Chief Paths. And he laid out a 5-fold path for our movement, a 5-fold path of what he called the 5 great stages of the spiritual life. And in recent months, Sangharakshita's brought out a new paper with his disciple Subhuti, just clarifying this further, and laying out a 5-fold system of practice for our Buddhist community. The same 5 great stages and a 5-fold system of practice for our Buddhist community. And that's what I'd like to talk about this evening. So, firstly, let's look at these 5 great stages of the spiritual life. So the first stage of the spiritual life begins with the arising of awareness. The arising of awareness, that's when the spiritual life could be said to begin. Before that, it's as though we're acting on autopilot. We're sleepwalking through life. But once awareness arises, we begin to wake up. We begin to wake up to what's happening. So awareness creates the ability in us to step back from our experience, to observe our mind and our actions. It creates what we call the gap, or the point of freedom. So it's in this first stage of the spiritual life we begin to notice our karmic patterns. We notice how our current actions are being influenced and conditioned by habits from the past, and how our actions in the present create the states of mind we're going to experience in the future. And to begin with, lots of the habits and patterns we've got, the way we shape our consciousness from moment to moment, well, they're below the horizon of our awareness. But when we start to meditate, we cultivate more and more awareness. And we start to try to practice Buddhist ethics, and we notice when we act in line with our ideals and when we fall short, when we act inconsistently with our ethics. And it appears more like we're just a collection of different selves, rather than just one self who's trying to act in line with ethics. It's more like there's lots of different strands to our being. It's more like we're just a collection of different selves. So, for example, we might behave completely differently in different situations. There might be how we are on a Tuesday night at the Buddhist centre, and then we might be completely different at work, a completely different person at work. And then again, we might be completely different with our family, and very different with our school friends or university friends. So it's as though the different strands in us are almost like different selves, and these come to the front, they come to the fore in different situations. And without awareness, without this quality of awareness, well, we remain unintegrated, and these different strands, well, they pull in different directions, and we remain in conflict. We've got an inner conflict going on. So if we're in the stage of being unintegrated, an unintegrated person without much awareness, well, they won't really know themselves very well, even though they might think that they do. Other people might experience somebody like this as being a bit unreliable, a bit inconsistent. An unintegrated person will be out of touch with how they feel about things. Probably will have blind spots, patterns that are really obvious to everybody else, but we just can't see them. And that's what happens in this first stage of integration. But the stage of integration involves bringing awareness to both our internal patterns, the states of mind and the internal patterns, and the external conditions and how they affect us. And it has the effect of bringing all these different aspects of ourselves together. So through the practice of ethics, the practice of awareness, we create a unified whole, a consistent identity, and which is able to act consistently in line with our ideals. And so it's a stage of becoming more whole and more wholesome. That's this first stage of integration. So if we've cultivated an integrated mind, well, that's a very potent mind indeed. An integrated mind is a potent mind, because we can aim that, we can direct an integrated mind to take advantage of the forces of karma. So, yeah, in this first stage, we're dwelling in the gap and we're just noticing what happens. We're in the gap and we're just bringing awareness and noticing what's happening. In the second stage, we're also dwelling in the gap. We can choose to act creatively. We can choose to act in ways that express our interrelatedness with other people. We can work creatively with karma. We can start to direct our consciousness. We can direct the change and work with karma to create more and more expansive states of mind. So it's in this stage we're really carving out new habits. We're creating new positive habits. We're carving out new channels for our mind in a way. So in this stage, it could be seen as an ethical stage where we're basically applying the precepts to all the different aspects of our lives. We're cultivating skillful intentions, and particularly through the meditation like the metta bhavana. So returning to water again, the image of water. The Buddha used another metaphor of water, another simile. And he used that to illustrate the way we work with our mind in these first two stages. So the Buddha used the image of an irrigator. And an irrigator who is digging channels, carving out channels to draw water. And drawing water away from their habitual course, that is run down for many, many years, and to draw water off into new, more effective directions. And in the same way as an irrigator is drawing off water into these new directions, well, we're working with our mind to create new intentions, new volitions. And when we're acting with the positive precepts of kindness, generosity, contentment, truthful speech, well, we're cultivating a more and more positive, expansive, radiant mind. And in turn, what we create through karma, we create, we act more positively, we create a more positive mind, we have a more positive, expansive experience of the world. We start to cultivate positive emotions like empathy, gratitude, reverence, loving kindness. So this is all going on in the second great stage of the spiritual life. We've become aware of our patterns and we've started to direct them into new directions, new positive directions. So the first two stages, integration of positive emotion, they could be described as becoming a happy, healthy human being. A happy, healthy human being. And we're creating a mind we're working with karma to create a robust mind, a positive mind, a mind that's psychologically and emotionally happy, integrated. So you could call this becoming a happy, healthy human being. And you don't have to be a Buddhist to notice that actions have consequences. It's not just Buddhists who will notice that actions have consequences. And but in essence, all ethically good people, the best in religion, psychotherapy, helping people to work with principles of karma to become ethical, to become a happy, healthy human being. But however, as a Buddhist, we go further than that. As a Buddhist, we're committing to working with both the karma niyama and the dharma niyama processes. So becoming a happy, healthy human being is only the start of the path. It's just the start of the Buddhist path. In Buddhist practice, the reason we're working with the karma niyama to create a robust, positive, radiant, potent mind is because that's the basis for the dharma niyama to arise, for seeing the truth of things, for seeing reality as it is. So going for refuge as a Buddhist, the act of being a Buddhist in Buddhist practice, involves a reorientation of our life to build conditions for the dharma niyama, the currents of the dharma niyama to unfold. So a different analogy, a farming analogy. You could see our ethical practice, our karmic practice, as like ploughing, fertilising, watering soil, creating the conditions so that sowing may take place, so a crop might grow. So you're creating the right conditions for the dharma niyama to arise. So the next stage, the stage of spiritual death, the next great stage, well, this is directly concerned with sowing the seeds of insight, cultivating the currents and processes of the Dharma Niyama. So reality is there, reality is in front of us all the time, it's right in front of our nose all the time, but we just don't see it the way it is. For some reason, for whatever reason, we just don't see it. We've always got the potential, every moment, to engage with the Dharma Niyama, but it's as though we've closed the curtains and we just don't want to see it. So we put up artificial barriers, and they cut us off from reality, and they cut us off from other people. So, but occasionally we might get flashes of insight, flashes of the way things are. The Buddha said usually the way we usually see things is upside down. We've got topsy-turvy views of things, the Buddha said. So what we see, we see instead of what we see in a constantly changing flow of events, we see it as containing fixed entities, unchanging entities, and that are able to bring us lasting satisfaction. We see things and other people in terms of their usefulness to us. So whilst we're misreading reality in this way, well, the conditions aren't in place for the Dharma Niyama to arise, for these processes to unfold that lead to enlightenment. And the truth, as I said before, the truth is like the eddies in the stream, we don't exist independently from the rest of the world. All events arise in dependence on other events and constantly changing. They're empty of any fixed, unchanging essence, and that includes us as well. Everything we experience is just constantly changing events, a flow of constantly changing events. So, it's called the stage of spiritual death, which can sound a bit frightening. So, what dies? Who dies? So the stage of spiritual death, what dies, what drops away is our illusions. The illusions about ourselves and reality. We give up what's called self-clinging. And what takes place is a radical shift, a permanent radical shift in our being. And it's sometimes called the turning about of the deepest seat of our consciousness. So as a result of this shift, this shift deep in our being, we no longer see things in terms of their usefulness to us, but we appreciate them for what they are. And the emotional counterpart of this wisdom is compassion. So we have a turning about the deepest seat of our consciousness, and what arises is wisdom and compassion. At this stage, when we're no longer caught up in those delusions, the illusory nature, those concepts have dropped away, well then the conditions in place, and that's when the stream of the Dharma Niyama will arise. And this is sometimes called stream entry, and sometimes you get these paths of Buddhist practice, and you get the stage of entering the stream of the Dharma, stream entry, or insight arising. In other traditions, you could equate it with the arising of the bodhicitta. Something very different. It's as though something completely outside of our usual experience arises and starts to guide us towards enlightenment. We're just being led towards enlightenment. We've entered a stream of the Dharma, and that will just carry us towards enlightenment. Which sounds pretty nice, actually. That sounds like a nice thing to happen. But that's the stage of spiritual death, is the barriers drop away. And the next stage, the stage of spiritual rebirth, is basically the Dharma Niyama processes are starting to have an influence on us. They're taking us towards enlightenment. They're leading us in the direction of enlightenment. And the Dharma Niyama starts to become the major influence on our life, our spiritual life. So something else has entered the picture. And our effort changes. Our effort becomes more about cooperating with the Dharma Niyama processes. So this stage of spiritual rebirth involves consciously engaging with those processes, those currents within reality. We do whatever we can to assist the unfolding of these processes and their influence on us. And this is a stage where we cooperate with the Dharma Niyama processes. We encourage them by imaginatively connecting with the transcendental, with enlightenment. We do that by connecting with a figure of enlightenment, usually the form of the Buddha, or maybe different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but we use that form to imaginatively connect with the Dharma Niyama and to cooperate with those forces that are at play. So, let's have a sip of water. The water's quite a theme throughout the talk. So. So we started to cooperate with the Dharma Niyama. We're nearly at the end of the path. We've become more and more aligned with reality. Our actions have become more and more an expression of the way things are. We're becoming more and more spontaneously generous and compassionate. Quite a radical change from when we started out on the path all those years ago. We're now becoming spontaneously compassionate, spontaneously generous. At this point we made a radical shift in our being, and now we're becoming more and more spontaneously compassionate and generous. And as we become even more compassionate, more and more spontaneously generous, well, the fruits of that effort, the fruit of this effort of cooperating in Buddhahood, which is the final stage, the stage of no more effort, is the goal of Buddhist life, Buddhahood, awakening, enlightenment. And it's also called the stage of spontaneous compassionate activity. Sangharakshita in his talk in 1978, he called this stage of no more effort spiritual receptivity. And we'll see just in a little while, well, our practice in daily life involves letting go when we set up conditions, just letting go, opening up, being receptive, allowing the fruits to emerge. And if we're looking at a distinct stage in the spiritual life, this is the final stage. This is the stage of Buddhahood, of letting go. There's no more effort, no more work to be done. It's Buddhahood. It's spontaneous, compassionate activity. So, quite a journey. We've gone from first coming into the Buddhist Centre, we've become integrated in positive spiritual death, turning about in the deepest seat of our consciousness. We've started to cooperate with the Dharma Niyama processes, and now we're enlightened. The path is complete. So this is these are the 5 great stages of the spiritual life, from the start, from awareness arising to Buddhahood. So a complete fivefold path, 5-stage path. So for most of us, for me, and I imagine most of us, we're going to be somewhere in these stages. We're going to be working with the Karma Niyama, trying to become more integrated, trying to become more positive, trying to become a happy, healthy human being. That's going to be the work for most of us. Quite a long time, probably, for a number of years. Maybe trying to become stream entrants, but for a lot of us, we're going to be working in these stages. But what do we do in these stages? How do we set up the conditions for the Dharma Niyama to arise? What's the work, what's the karmic work that we need to do? How do we set up these conditions for the Dharma to arise, to become an influence on our life? What do we do? So in a recent paper, Sangharakshita published a recent paper with Subhuti, and he kind of re-emphasised these 5 great stages, but he also emphasised that these 5 great stages of the spiritual life, they're qualities, they're aspects of our spiritual life, and we need them at every stage. So at every stage in our spiritual life, from beginner to Buddhahood, we need all 5 of these to be aspects, to be qualities in our practice, our Buddhist practice. And so what we've got, if I can turn this page, is a system of practice. These 5 great stages become a system of practice, with each of these aspects at every stage in that path becoming more deeply practiced and changing in character. But they're all present right from the outset. So how are they present? To begin with, integration as a quality. The principle of integration, I've talked a bit about already, but it's cultivated through the daily practice of mindfulness, becoming more aware of how we are, how we're conditioned, and how we affect the people around us, how we affect the world around us. Integration is becoming conscious and aware of our psychological, our emotional, and our ethical patterns, and taking responsibility for them. Taking responsibility for our actions and the consequences of our actions. So the mindfulness of breathing and cultivating mindfulness in our daily life is crucial. It's a crucial practice for this quality of integration, to developing awareness. But also reflecting about your ethical practice, talking to friends about your ethical practice. It's a very good way to bring more of your patterns into awareness. So this is something that, I suppose recently after I've become a mitra, Madhyudasa and I've become mitras, we started to meet up every week. We meet up once a week and we just start to talk about our ethical patterns with each other. And it was a really valuable thing to do. I started just to learn more and more about my ethical patterns just from having somebody each week to talk to about, somebody I could trust really, a friend to explore my ethical patterns, start to talk to about them. So friends are very useful to talk about our ethical patterns. But our friends are also very useful because they can point things out to us that we might not have seen. So I mentioned that if we're unintegrated, I'd like to be kind of a lot of our patterns below the surface of our awareness, and we just won't see them. But if we've got a friend we can trust, sometimes they might be able to point them out to us in a kind way. They'll point them out to us, hopefully. But a sign of a lack of integration, a lack of emotional and psychological integration, well, it might express itself to others as inconsistency or unreliability. So perhaps one minute we're really fired up about the Dharma, really fired up about Dharma practice, and we resolve to practice every day for the next month. But then maybe a week later or a month later, well, we're into something else, we're into our career or into partying, something completely different. So a way to test our integration, a way to test your integration, just to reflect, just to ask yourself, do I follow through on things that I say I'm going to do? Do I do what I commit I'm going to do? So a few weeks ago I told the story about the light bulbs. Not everybody might have heard the story about the light bulbs, so I'll briefly mention it. It was, I became a mitra and I thought I should have an important job around the Buddhist centre. And I went to see Amogavangsa, and he gave me the job of changing the light bulbs in the Buddhist centre, which I was a bit disappointed about. I thought I should have a more important job than that. But I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I'll stick at it. So the first weekend, I got the ladder out, I got the light bulbs out, and I was very pleased with myself. I went around and I changed all the light bulbs in the Buddhist centre. The next weekend, I was a bit more reluctant actually. I didn't really want to spend my weekend changing light bulbs in the Buddhist centre, but I did it. And I was pleased with myself that I managed to do it. I never did it again after that actually. I never changed the light bulbs again. It was quite humiliating because I needed to go back to Amogavangsa and resign. Resign from being the person who changes the light bulbs because I wasn't integrated enough to be able to do it. And it's still something I work with. And recently I said to Mokshadara that I would learn Pali, the language of Pali, in a kind of an inspired moment. There's a part of me, a strand of myself, thought, I want to learn Pali. And I haven't done anything about it since. That was a number of weeks ago. And I met up with Mokshadara a few times and still haven't done anything about it. So, just ask yourself, reflect, do you do what you say you're going to do? Are you able to act consistently with what you've committed to do? So another key factor in your success with this stage, that cultivating integration, will be to notice how different external conditions affect you, and to put yourself in conditions that support your practice, conditions that support your efforts, engaging in activity that's in tune with your aspirations. So there are some people here who work with other Buddhists, some people who choose to work with other Buddhists, there's some people who choose to live with other Buddhists. And there's some people here, I think, who live and work with the Buddhists. So that might be possible. It might be possible for you to just put yourself, in very supportive conditions, external conditions, a lot of the time. It might not be possible. But you can come to the centre regularly, put yourself in positive conditions, or just notice what conditions are positive, what conditions have a positive effect on you, and put yourself in those conditions. Be creative, because within whatever conditions you're in, there may be things you can't change, but there will be things you can be creative with. So notice what conditions have a positive effect on you and change them. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on largely what most of us are going to be working on with these qualities, but all of these qualities, they're present right the way through to Buddhahood at all of the stages. So later on in the spiritual path, our awareness deepens and it expands, and we begin to what we integrate is reality. We begin to integrate and align ourselves with reality. And our practice becomes more about staying consistently aware of the true nature of our experience, aware of the impermanence of what we're observing, and also aware of the integrating and being aware of the larger context, the Dharma Niyama, as a force or a current that's leading us towards Buddhahood. So hopefully that's going to go well for us. We've cultivated awareness. We're an integrated being. We're cultivating that integrated mind. We're dwelling in the gap. And when we're in the gap, as I said before, we can begin to choose how we act. We can begin to act creatively. We're starting to cultivate positive states, hopefully, states of metta, states of generosity, reverence, gratitude. So how do we engage with, what does this look like, engage in positive emotion in our daily life? What does it look like? What can we do? Well, it means we're practicing Buddhist ethics, the principles of Buddhist ethics in our daily life. So we'll need to learn the Buddhist ethic or precepts to begin with, learn the 5 precepts, and put them into practice in our daily life, but particularly the positive precepts of generosity and kindness, particularly those. So we'll be working in the Metabhavana. We'll be working both in and out of the Metabhavana, in and out, on and off the cushion, to cultivate kindness, to cultivate a responsive metta to people. And we'll be cultivating a perspective that doesn't include just our own needs, but includes the needs of the people around us. There's very practical ways to cultivate more expansive states of consciousness. Spiritual friendship is one, to really cultivate friendships, spiritual friendships with other people, people in the Sangha. Participate in the Sangha, participate in building the Sangha. Choose to look for ways just to deepen your connections with people, maybe meet with people outside of the Buddhist centre, deepen the friendships you've got with people from the Sangha. You might choose to meet up with order members, because order members hopefully are going to be in positive states themselves, so you might choose to meet up with order members. And it also includes this aspect, this quality of positive emotion. It includes qualities like faith and devotion. These are positive emotions that we're wanting to cultivate. Faith and devotion towards the Buddha, towards the Dharma and the Sangha. So reverence is said to be the natural response when our metta meets something higher than us. The natural response to that is devotion, is reverence. So that's a little bit about this quality of positive emotion. And again, at ordination, when we're order members within this kind of system of practice, positive emotion for us, it takes on a broader perspective again. Increasingly trying to serve something bigger than ourselves. Often this is expressed as work trying to spread the Dharma within the institutions, within the, may well be within a Buddhist centre, but trying to spread the Dharma within our institutions. So this is, there's quite a lot of work to do with these stages, integration of positive emotion. Quite a lot of work to do. And it involves a lot of effort. The working with the karma niyama involves a lot of effort. And if we're not careful, we might make our lives so busy and so full up that there's no space for the dharma niyama to arise. Because we're so busy trying to get enlightened, there's no space for the dharma niyama to arise, because we're just making so much effort to get enlightened. But it's there, the Dharma Niyama is there as a possibility in every moment, in every moment, the Dharma Niyama is a possibility. But our mind and our life are just so full up and so cluttered, we're just not able to set the conditions in place. So part of the work of creating the conditions for the Dharma Niyama, it involves creating spaces in our lives, gaps in our lives. So times in our life, spaces when we're receptive rather than active. And this is this quality of receptivity. So you've noticed the orders change slightly in this system. Receptivity was the fifth stage before, but when we're starting to work with Dharma Niyama processes, this is crucial. Receptivity is crucial. As hopefully I'll explain. So we need, if we fall into this trap of being very, very busy, we will need to spend some time doing nothing at all. Just doing absolutely nothing. And this can be done formally in meditation. So at the start, we can have a period at the start of our meditation practice where we're just relaxing. We're just settling down, just relaxing. Also at the end of our meditation, we can have a period of receptivity. Just letting go at the end of our meditation practice. Also, we can have spaces and gaps outside of meditation. So we might just experiment with just stopping and sitting and doing nothing. Just sitting in our armchair and doing nothing at all. It could be for 5 minutes, for 20 minutes, for an hour. Just doing nothing at all. So usually in our life, when we're quite busy, we're guided by instincts, we're guided by our emotions, by what we like, what we dislike. And they're very strong motivating factors in our life when we're very, very busy. But we've got a deeper faculty, a faculty that responds to qualities and responds to ideals, responds to beauty. And in the paper I've talked about a couple of times about the system of practice, Subhuti says, when we come into contact with individuals, symbols, teachings, images, that embody the Dharma Niyama, it'll invoke an answering in us, an appreciation, a devotion. So what is highest in us will resonate with what's highest in the universe. When we allow it to, when we create that space, when we allow things just to settle down, the busyness to settle down. And Shraddha, as I mentioned earlier, is sometimes translated as faith or confidence, but it's the faculty, it could be described almost as the voice of our higher self, the voice of the Dharma Niyama. And it's speaking to us in a very, very quiet voice all the time, just calling to us the direction we need to act, what we need to do. But we can only hear it if our mind is quiet, if our mind has space, if we're receptive to it. So one of the practices working in cultivating receptivity might just be to reflect on those experiences where you might have been guided by something higher. For example, I sometimes reflect, well, why did I first come to the Buddhist Centre? What was it that made me respond to the poster that I saw a poster in Cook's post office about Buddhism and meditation? There was some kind of hunch, an intuitive response that kind of seemed to be leading me in this direction. So you might want to reflect. There might have been, you might have experiences where there just seems like, something higher in you has been leading you towards the Dharma. So spiritual receptivity is closely linked to Shraddha, this faculty of Shraddha. And if we're going to cultivate this quality of receptivity, we need to be cultivating an openness to what's highest in the universe, to what Sangharakshita has called a progressive trend in reality, to what's beautiful, to what's true, to what's good, to the beautiful, to the true and to the good, a receptivity to it. And it's closely linked to our aesthetic appreciation of beauty, our appreciation of reverence as well. It involves us being lifted out of cramped states of mind and into contact with what's highest in the universe. So you can have those moments when it just feels like we're lifted out of that cramped state of mind and we're suddenly transported into a very different state of mind. So Sangharakshita said in the past, he gave a series of lectures in the past, and what he said is that we should aim to be part of a greater mandala of uselessness. And this is when we're not trying to value ourselves and others by how useful we are or how useful they are. We just appreciate things as they are. We just appreciate things not for their use, but just for them, just as they are in themselves. We just appreciate things for being beautiful in their own right. And he calls this the greater mandala of uselessness. So when I was writing the talk this afternoon, I got a bit full up of just all the ideas about the talk, and I got to the bit about spiritual receptivity, and I just got full up really. And so I realised I needed to put it into practice. I just needed to let go of the talk for a while. And so I picked up a book called Travel Letters, which is here. I picked up a book, and there's a book of letters that Sangharakshita had written to people, written to order members, I think in the 80s and 90s from his travels. And he was writing a letter, I just opened the book this afternoon, and he was writing a letter about what he'd been up to, what he'd been doing, basically very kind of day-to-day routine of what he'd been up to, what he'd been doing. But in the middle of the letter, where I opened it, there was a moment which was very different to that, and he said, at this moment, I am sitting at my desk at Sukhavati, looking out of the window. Opposite, there is a plot of bleached grass, half surrounded by blocks of flats, and the backside of a row of houses. In the middle of the plot, about 20 yards from my window, which is on the first floor, grows a single tree. Probably some kind of cherry. Since I started staying at my flat nearly 3 years ago, I have seen this tree covered with snow, covered with blossom, and standing completely bare. At the moment, its graceful spreading branches are thickly covered with green leaves, many of them edged with yellow owing to the lack of rain. So I kind of, in the middle of this letter, just describing what he's up to, all of a sudden it's just a moment of just appreciating the beauty out of his window and kind of sharing that with the order members in his letter. And it's just a very different space to what I probably myself would be in if I was writing a letter about what I've been up to and what I've been doing. So for me, it just gave me a flavour really of what I was trying to get across about appreciating, not really look at things of what we can do, other people, ourselves, of our value, taking value from what we've done and but just appreciating things, just appreciating the beauty that's around us, just appreciating ourselves without having to do anything to achieve anything. So another practical step might be just to seek out beauty in nature or the arts, spend time alone in nature. These are all ways that we can cultivate receptivity. So the fourth quality, spiritual death. So we saw on the stage of the path, and we looked at these 5 great stages. This stage, the stage of spiritual death, was a significant stage. It was a stage where it was a turning about in the deepest seat of our consciousness. It was the stage of stream entry. But this stage where the illusion of our independent, fixed self drops away, it'll only arise if we've done work right from the outset to cultivate this as a quality in our lives, to cultivate this aspect of spiritual death right from the outset. So to do this, well, we need to start by becoming clear about the Dharma. What is the Dharma? What is the Dharma saying? What are the Dharma concepts? So become clear about the Buddhist perspective on reality. Become clear about the Praticca Samuppada down here. Just become really clear what the Buddhist concepts are. The wheel and the gap, the 3 lakshanas. Just really know these concepts, really become clear about them. When you've got a clear understanding of them, well then you must reflect on them deeply, and how they apply to your life. So perhaps the most accessible way of reflecting about reality is to notice impermanence. We can notice impermanence all the time in your life. We can notice how everything in your life changes, and you're constantly changing. You can notice impermanence in your own mind, your own experience, all the time. Everything is constantly changing. So impermanence is something you can always notice. Another way of looking at spiritual death is the dropping away of limiting views about ourselves. So I can't do this, or I can't do that. These views about ourselves, which we think we're just a fixed way, a kind of particular kind of person who can't do a particular kind of thing, or that's not who we are. So you can engage with this quality of spiritual death in your life and your Buddhist practice by challenging that, really, by doing things that you think maybe you couldn't do or you shouldn't do. Put yourself in positions that encourage you to change. Perhaps taking on responsibility, or just doing things that you wouldn't usually do, just challenging those fixed views about yourself. And what about spiritual rebirth? So this quality, we've got the 5 qualities. What about spiritual rebirth, this final quality? How can we engage with this as a quality in our spiritual life? Well, at ordination we take on specific practices, meditation practices at ordination, and we visualise Buddha figures or Bodhisattva figures, and that's our way of connecting with the Dharma and Niyama processes to engage with them and for them to have an influence on us more and more in our life. So at ordination we take on these specific meditation practices, but what about from the outset? What can we be doing to engage with rebirth, spiritual rebirth from the outset? How can we engage with that? Well, it's crucial, it's important we've got a connection with something higher right from the outset, because if we don't, our practice is just about us, really. It's about kind of refining us and us becoming a happy, healthy human being, as we saw. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not going to lead to the Dharma and Niyama processes. If we're really serious, if we want to take our Buddhist practice all the way, if we're serious about wisdom, about insight, well, we need to be cultivating a connection with the goal, a connection with enlightenment, with awakening. And for most people, it's the Buddha, actually. The Buddha is a very accessible way into the Dharma Niyama, into enlightenment. We've got the statue of the Buddha here. It's difficult to put into words what our connection with enlightenment might be, but I'm sure each of us has got a connection with this statue of the Buddha. In our own way, it might be different for each of us, but we've got a connection with the Buddha and what he achieved through this image of the Buddha here. So the Buddha was a human being, like we're human beings. The Buddha was a human, but what he became was deeply mysterious, and it's very difficult to try and connect with what the Buddha actually became. But through the figure of the Buddha, we can start. We can have a sense, we can have a connection, a real connection with the Dharma Niyama. So our task to cultivate this aspect in our life, in our spiritual life of rebirth, spiritual rebirth, is to engage with. It might be with the Buddha, it might be one of the Bodhisattva figures or the Buddha figures, but for most people, the historical Buddha is most accessible. So, you might want to read stories about the life of the Buddha. For me, not everyone's going to have an opportunity to do this, but a couple of years ago we went on a pilgrimage to India, and this was really, really important for me, really important for connecting with the historical Buddha. Just to go and visit the places where the Buddha taught and lived. The Bodhi tree where he gained enlightenment, Shravasti, Jetted Grove where he taught a lot of the suttas. just felt a really, really strong connection with the Buddha. The Buddha became alive, really, as a figure. A really strong connection with enlightenment, with the Buddha. Puja, performing puja is another effective way to engage emotionally with enlightenment, with the goal. And there's an opportunity to do that. Lee set up a puja group, and you can sign up for that on the notice board if you want to. But puja, it's a very powerful way of connecting with the goal. And I think it's particularly important in our world, actually, in our society, because in our world, it's only the things that you can measure that are taken as being real. It's only the things that are, we in our society, we only value the things that we can measure. But how do you measure enlightenment? How do you measure the Dharma Niyama? How do you measure the Buddha? So we need to kind of counteract that tendency just to devalue things that can't be measured. And we need to cultivate reverence, cultivate the quality of reverence for what's highest, what's higher than us. Allow ourselves to feel devotion to the Buddha or to the archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So what's a practical way of doing this? Well, you might consider having a shrine in your house, a place in your house, a place in one of the rooms in your house, which is a place that reminds you of what's highest, what's highest in the universe, what your highest ideals might be. Perhaps a statue of the Buddha. You might choose to have a statue of the Buddha in your house, or maybe even a shrine within your house. If you've got a shrine, or you might want to dust it down, you might want to kind of wipe the dust off your shrine, replace the flowers, get some new flowers for your shrine. Just something that reminds you of the Buddha. You might chant mantras, you might want to chant a mantra throughout the day, particularly if it's a challenging time, if you've got a challenging day, you might just want to be chanting mantras just to keep a connection with what's highest in the universe. So you can come into relationship with the Buddha. You can develop this quality of rebirth, spiritual rebirth. But sometimes it might feel like the Buddha's a bit far away from us. It might feel like that's too much, or the Buddha's a bit too far away from us. And another route to cultivating a connection with the goal, you could read memoirs. You could read the memoirs of Sangharakshita, or you could read the memoirs of other Buddhist teachers and practitioners. Very inspiring just to see how great Buddhist practitioners have put these qualities to just embodied in a human being. Again, if that feels a bit far away from you, then you could look at a spiritual friend who maybe is just a bit further along the path than you are, and they may just embody some of these qualities just a little bit more than you do, and they just your next step becomes a bit clearer. So for me, this again is a valuable practice to fall back on. If I'm not sure what to do in a situation, I might think, well, what would a Mogavamsa do in this situation? How would a Mogavamsa behave? How would Vajratara behave? How would my spiritual friends behave in this situation? And you can, that gives you the next step towards the goal, the next step towards the Buddha. So hopefully you haven't been asking yourself why did I come here and why am I listening to this talk? But to conclude the talk, this system of practice, well, it crystallises Sangharakshita's teachings over the last 45 years, and it's something that is re-emphasised in recent months. And I get the sense, well, he's 87, he was 87 on Sunday, he's probably not going to live for very much longer. And he's really clarifying what our movement is about, what our Buddhist community is about. And he's chosen over the recent months to clarify this system of practice for our Buddhist community. And it really kind of clarifies and crystallises 45 years of experience of our Buddhist order into a very kind of coherent and clear system of practice that we can engage with. And if we want to engage with it, it works. The practices really do work. So in our movement, we're doing the practice, we're engaging with the Karma Niyama processes, and it does feel like the Dharma Niyama is engaging with us. It does feel like that. And you can see people come along and engage with the practices, and they change. People change very, very quickly if they really engage with these practices. They do work. So in a recent message to the order, Sangharakshita said, "I urge all of you to apply this system fully and deeply to yourselves. The karmic work of integration and developing positive emotion, and more especially the explicitly dharmic work of spiritual receptivity, death and rebirth. If each of us does work diligently on ourselves in this way, then everything else will follow." Thank you.